Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zilinskas, your podcast host. Today we're going to be talking to Julia Geisman. We're going to talk about quite a few things within the corporation. We're going to talk about corporate culture. We're going to talk about what it means when a company says something, but they do something different. We're going to touch a little bit on cognitive dissonance. And I think one of the most important topics is why women must become change agents. Let me tell you a little bit about Julia Geisman. Over the last 30 years, Julia Geisman has been laser focused on the people side of the business to increase individual, team, and organizational success. Julia founded CareerAgility on the belief that inclusion is the DNA of organizations. We're going to talk quite a bit about that. For the last 15 years, she has been attacking the root causes of workplace inequities, concentrating on inclusion. Julia has been a panelist and a speaker at national and international conferences, has conducted hundreds of workshops and webinars, is a coach and trusted advisor to senior executives, and is actively engaged in organizations promoting inclusion and equity. She is known for her ability to provoke new thinking and her sense of humor. Now, the new thinking, I think, is critical because you will hear Julia talk about her interpretation of Snow White and also just the Disney language and how we need to change that language. I am totally on board with all of that. So with that, stay tuned for this riveting conversation with Julia Geisman. Julia, thank you so much for being here on the No Woman Left Behind podcast show.
Thank you, Rosie.
So I know that you are very knowledgeable on corporate culture. Can you tell us a little bit about what corporate culture is? Like, what does it mean?
And the question is, how does corporate culture influence behavior?
Okay.
That's really the big question. Because human beings are very contextual and we adapt to our culture behaviorally. So the organization consists of the values of the collective values, and it usually comes out of the senior leadership, more specifically the CEO. It's the CEO that sets the culture of an organization. And sometimes it's very tacit. In other words, it's never explicitly defined. Although oftentimes you'll see, listed on the website, corporate values and so forth and so on. But there are certain assumptions. There's the espoused values of the organization, which is, this is what we say. And then there's the tacit, which is, it's not spoken, but if you were to look around, you would get a sense of what's really going on. So for example, an organization may say they're a team oriented. But if you go to that, or if you're on site and you look around, and this is a little bit different because we have a hybrid situation now. Not everybody's in the office at the same time. But those people who are in the office, are there a lot of closed doors? Do you see a lot of people working together? So that would be kind of a tacit understanding that probably not team oriented, because there's nothing that fosters that team environment. And then there's another subtle piece to it, which are the assumptions, the unspoken assumptions. And this is a tough one for women because the assumption, even though, for example, organizations may say, yes, they believe in, family time and so forth. And yet, if a woman particularly needs to take family time, it's held against her. Even though the espoused value is, yes, we support family time.
That's so interesting.
Yes. So Edward Schein is the one who came out with these three different definitions of culture. So culture is the environment of the organization that is the collective understanding of how to behave.
So, Julia, do you think that corporations are purposefully deceiving new employees? Or do they truly believe that they are, for like in the example that you said, team oriented, but they're blind to it? Like what is the loss in translation there?
Well, let me share with you the results of inclusion assessments that we conduct in organizations. And so we look at the culture, we look at development and advancement opportunities, as well as the overall support individuals receive to be successful in their jobs. And that could, where they feel psychologically safe and so forth. And this is particularly true of women and people who are kind of marginalized. And we administer this assessment to everybody in the organization, including the CEO, okay? Because we want to know if the organization is really aligned with the espoused values and systems and processes and so forth. One part of it, the very first set of statements, is around personal beliefs regarding the importance of an inclusive work environment. Now, we ask people to rate their level of agreement on a scale of 1 to 10. So what happens is everybody, and this answers your question, everybody rates the importance of an inclusive work environment in the 8s. Remember, on a 10-point scale, and sometimes 8.5. Everybody pretty much is aligned with that. But when you have statements about the culture, it drops off precipitously. So, and when we look at the data around that, you have to ask, why is that so?
Yes.
So from our perspective, it indicates either political correctness, cognitive dissonance. In other words, people are not walking their talk, or a true belief of the importance. Now, if it's the true belief, the individuals will probably not stay because the environment does not align with what their beliefs are. So that's an indication of a problem with engagement and retention. If it's talking kind of out both sides of your mouth, that's the political correctness. That is the problem. That people are doing things out of political correctness more times than not. But the subset to that is cognitive dissonance, where they might believe it, but their actions don't reflect it. And part of that is that they're unconscious about their actions.
Right.
Totally unaware. So there's a certain responsibility for the women to want to assume the role of a change agent, change maker.
Yes.
And a lot of people think it's forcing people to do differently, to be different. Oh, you're a white male is, privilege, and therefore you're bad and you should behave differently. But that's not the most effective way of having a sustainable change. In change management, you meet people where they are.
Oh, okay.
And build that trust, and then you can lead them.
So tell me a little bit about what you just said. So meet people where they are. Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, let's say a woman feels as if she doesn't have a strong voice. So, rather than being punishing and aggressive about it, first of all, depending upon the relationship, you have to really honor whatever the relationship is.
Yeah.
If it's somebody, if it's, let's say, your manager and you're in a meeting with other people, particularly you're the minority in the meeting, and the usual behavior, we all know this, all the women know this, is mansplaining, talking over women, making a suggestion and then nobody acknowledges it, and then a male colleagues that makes the same suggestion, everybody's, whoa, look at that. Okay, we all know that.
Yes.
As women, men don't understand that. Actually, truthfully, they're unaware of that. Okay, so I want to use that as an example of a couple of things women can do. What I coach women on doing is, when you feel as if you're not heard within a meeting, for example, and somebody else co-ops runs with your idea. Now, this takes confidence. I always say, hey, Steve, I'm so glad you like my idea. Let's work together to make it a reality.
Oh, I love that, Julia. I love it.
So what we're doing is we're aligning ourselves with that person, and it's done in a non-threatening way.
Oh, yes. Because, women can't be threatening at all. We can't be aggressive.
Well, nobody can threaten. I don't care. You can't threaten me as another woman. It doesn't work. People push back when they feel threatened. This is normal. We're hardwired to push back when we feel threatened, and the threat can be in a variety of different ways.
Right.
Going into conflict, a difference of opinions could be considered a threat to my capabilities, to my intelligence, to what I know, to my position. That creates conflict because that threat will trigger an internal emotion for that person who feels threatened. And they will either come out fighting, they'll go after you in some way, they will get angry, they'll shut you down. But what has happened in that experience of feeling threatened, they will behave in a particular way that is not collaborative.
Right.
Okay. So when you talk about conflict and you talk about why people behave the way they do, when you try to make people change, they automatically feel threatened.
Yeah. Now, a little while ago, you said you have to be a change agent. What do you mean by that? Because we just said that if you're trying to make someone change, they may feel threatened. So what's the difference there?
Yeah, but remember, I said change agent or change maker, but the main thing is to meet people where they are.
Yes, you did.
Okay. And by meeting people where they are and building trust or familiarity, comfort, then you're no longer threatening. So going back to the scenario of the meeting, it's your manager who is who's pulling the meeting together. You get co-opted, you own it, you take it back. And then you say to your manager, with whom you should have a good relationship.
Yes.
And say, hey, Tom, and I'm assuming it's a male because that's what corporate America is primarily. And you call his attention to it. Hey, Tom, listen, I just want to mention something to you. And I know you're totally unaware of this. But what I've noticed in the meeting is that myself and another woman really didn't have much airtime. And I wonder if there's if you're open to it, or I wonder if you could be a little bit more vigilant or be more aware of making sure everybody can make an equal contribution.
Yeah.
That's being a change agent. Because honestly, people are it's like I'm unaware of many things until somebody says, oh, did you realize that? And it's like, then at that point I can choose. Well, I'm not changing. Doesn't matter.
Yes.
Or God, thank you. I didn't realize I had done X, Y, Z. So that in effect, in the way we interact with each other, we can oftentimes be change agents because we're broadening people's awareness.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like the fact that you said that first we have to build that rapport. We need to make sure that there's trust and there's some back and forth there, and then you can start introducing whatever changes you would like to introduce. I think that's really smart. And when you were talking about conflict, I still to this day it just irks me so much that men can fly off the handle and it's just the way they are. But if a woman does the exact same thing, she's called different names or she's not as respected or, a variety of differences there. So it's very difficult, that imbalance there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, everything that a woman does within a corporate environment is kind of a fine line, everything.
Yes.
So that's no different. And first of all, emotions, you have to understand. we have to own our emotions.
Oh,
this has to do with emotional intelligence. So people talk about it's funny, I've been having this conversation a lot lately. People talk about interpersonal conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There is no interpersonal conflict. It's intrapersonal conflict. Now, why do I say that? Everybody has different triggers. Some of us have the same or very similar triggers. But the issue is that when something comes along that disrupts the status quo, it triggers an emotion in us, to which we and our reaction is to externalize it.
Yes.
Some people don't. They suppress it. They get angry, passive aggressive, all sorts of stuff going on. But it's still there. So, and their passive aggressive behavior can trigger other people. So if you come along, Rosie, and you say something to me that triggers an emotional response in me, and I react to it, and it triggers an emotional response in you, kaboom.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if I get triggered and I externalize my triggerness and I say something to you, but you don't get triggered, how do you deal with it? You deal with it as a problem-solving situation or as an opportunity to say, hey, it seems like you're upset about something. How can I be supportive? So this is why I say there is no interpersonal. It's really, you need to monitor what's going on for you.
Yes.
And so that's conflict. But interestingly enough, within organization, we're all conflict adverse. We all are. This society is conflict adverse. And corporations are nothing more than a microcosm of our society.
Yes.
So organizations are conflict averse. And when you have differences of opinion, you will have conflict. The problem is that we associate conflict with combativeness. It's combative because a lot of times we suppress our emotions and then kaboom. So when you think about, when you were talking about men can be expressive and blow up, it's because something's going on that causes them to it's like the proverbial can with the spring-loaded snakes in it, and you open up
the Jack in the Box.
Yeah, Jack in the Box, whatever. So what happens is, if you understand that conflict is nothing more than differences, and if you want to have robust solutions, if you want to have a dynamic organization, if you want to have or be in an organization or an environment that stimulates innovation, you're going to have differences. And that is the key. In fact, I was listening to a podcast by Adam Grant, and he was talking about organizations that are the most creative and successful are those that really have a lot of differences of opinions or differences of perspective.
Yes.
Okay, so it's differences of perspective. And the key now, this is why it gets really complicated and there's a lot to unpack here. The key is having a culture that embraces differences in the spirit of learning.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So that if the corporate culture is based upon a learning organization, it embraces differences. That's number one. If the individuals within the organization have an inclusive mindset, because that's fundamental to the culture of the organization, then rather than reacting to differences, individuals, when they experience a difference in perspective, rather than pushing back or feeling threatened by it, say, that's interesting. Help me understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I really like that. So what I'm hearing you say is that everything is pretty much layered, because you as an adult, as an employee, you're going to encounter that conflict, and it's up to you to not react to that conflict so that you can actually then have an emotionally intelligent conversation with the other person so that you can resolve your differences to solve the problem. So you're right.
It could be. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you're plugged in around some type of a feeling, like, for example, one of my big hot buttons is feeling like I'm not heard. And I know exactly where it comes from. My childhood experience, I can tell you.
Oh, I now I have to hear, Julia. Tell me, spend 2 or 3 minutes telling us about that.
What? Tell you about what?
About your childhood experience where you know exactly where that comes from.
Well, this is kind of revealing. My mother was bipolar.
Okay.
So fundamentally, there was a challenge. And I would say things and she wouldn't hear it.
Okay.
Or she wouldn't honor it. And it kind of showed up in other parts of my life, too. I mean, it happens to a lot of us.
Sure.
So my deal is, and actually, interestingly enough, it also shows up in my brother.
Oh.
So there's family history here. But so if I feel like I'm not heard, it triggers a sense of frustration and anger. And I have to monitor that. And because I know that's where it's coming from. So then, and this is the other thing that I've actually fine-tuned as my behavior. If I'm not heard initially, like in coaching, for example, I don't know about you, but I know I push until I hit a wall. Okay, I will push. And when I hit that limit, it gives me insight into the person, and then I figure out another way to communicate to that person or to engage that person. So, for example, I was communicating the department head of an international law firm. It was the corporate department, and he had an anger management problem. I mean, he would explode, and it was impacting his entire department. I recognize the anger management because of my brother, frankly. And I kept working him and just saying, well, what about this? What about more on a personal level? And he said, that's it. I like myself.
Oh.
I like myself. Okay. So then the approach I took was, let's talk about how it's impacting your business. So we kept it at business level. One of the things we did was to do a 360 with him, and he didn't respond. And so I'm going over the results with him, and I said, listen, don't you want to know how you measure up to other people that are in similar positions than you? Because I knew he was highly competitive. And that got him to do it. Okay. So at the end of the coaching environment, the coaching engagement, he said to me, you're brilliant in the way you never lost focus. You knew exactly what you wanted to accomplish with me, but you did it in a way that I understood. So that's really important, because if you're so blinded by your own emotions and goals,
yes,
you can't see and hear what's going on with the other person or the environment.
And that actually helps, I think, managers understand what they need to do in order to be effective leaders with their team. Because if they're kind of like the coaching client that you said, if they're thinking that they're doing it right and nobody else is, can tell them what to do or whatever, well, they're never going to get anywhere. And if they're not open to, if they don't have that emotional intelligence and are open to hear, hey, don't you want to see how you compare to everybody else? And I think the curiosity probably got him more than him wanting to improve, because apparently he didn't need to improve.
Well, he liked himself fundamentally, but, again, men have a difficult time with the emotional stuff. But here's the funny part of it. I ran into him at a restaurant with his wife a number of years later, must have been 5 years later. And he introduced me to her, and she said, "Oh, you're the person who changed him."
Oh, wow. Good for you, Julia. That's incredible.
So that's what I mean about meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
And then you can lead them. So women, and this now ties into, Disney.
Mm-hmm. Oh, gosh. Yes. Let's talk about Disney. Yes.
Okay. And how that has affected not just women, but also men.
Yes.
Okay. So I deconstructed Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs for the messaging in it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 7 negative messages in there for women. The long and short of it is, it's kill your competition. That's why women, when they get, it's like, why are women not supporting each other in the corporate world? Well, competition with women is very different than the competition with men, the way men compete with each other. That's more positional, hierarchical. But with women, it's more about the mama bear syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And also a woman, especially a woman who really had to fight and claw her way to the top, feels like, I paid my dues, you have to too. There's that piece, but there's the other piece, which is being very protective of her home, her hearth. Okay. So kill your competition, be beautiful, be subservient, whistle while you work. Whistle while you work.
Yeah.
We'll take care of you if you're just happy and so forth. And then when she dies, now this is really perverse. She's so beautiful. The dwarfs couldn't bear to bury her in a coffin. So they put her in a glass coffin in the middle of the woods. Now that's kind of sick.
Yeah.
And you wonder why, but the thing is even worse. The thing is, and by the way, the metaphor for that is you're beautiful and you're dead.
Oh, wow.
But here's the other part of it. Now, the version I read, Grimm Brothers, the prince comes along and sees her. Oh, she's so beautiful. I have to have her back at my castle. Okay, trophy. She's a beautiful trophy, but dead. So he buys her. And on her way to the castle, the poison apple pops out of her mouth and she becomes alive.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes off to the castle happily ever after, being that trophy. That's really sick.
Yeah. And that also, with the stepmother, that highlights the fact that women don't support women too. So
that's right. Mirror on the wall.
Yeah.
But so when you look at all of the Grimm brother fairy tales, and then I have another caveat about Beauty and the Beast, but anyway, when you look at all the Grimm brother fairy tales, it is all about disempowering women. And even Shakespeare with Taming of the Shrew.
Mm-hmm.
Kate was like, wow. And she was considered a shrew, therefore she had to be tamed and subjugated. Right? So women are taught to be disempowered.
Yes.
And it's in there constantly. So the question is, how can women regain their power? And that's why I say, in order to do that, you have to own your role as a change manager, because that's a powerful position. Absolutely. But you can't go in there with blazing guns. with bazookas.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Beauty and the Beast. Okay. If you remember Beauty and the Beast, I
Yes.
don't know if you do. Okay.
Yes.
So Belle, according to Disney,
Right.
Belle, smart, didn't want to have anything to do with Gaston, who was handsome
Mhm.
but stupid.
Yes.
Her father gets captured by the Beast. She, on her own terms, goes to the castle to rescue, mind you, her father, who was in a vulnerable position. She's the rescuer.
Yes.
They make a deal with the Beast, right?
Mm-hmm.
That she will stay there as collateral
Yeah.
while her father goes off and does what he needs to do. But she knows unequivocally that he will be back. So it was an agreement. She was involved in the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Meet people where they are. She is unconditional in the way she's dealing with the Beast, dancing with him and so forth, according to Disney.
Yeah.
Okay. And in doing so, she's meeting him where he is, accepting him for who he is. She breaks the spell and he emerges. She allows him to be fully who he is.
Yes.
Okay. Now here's the interesting piece. That fairy tale was originally written by a woman.
Oh.
A French woman back in the 1700s.
Wow. I have learned so much today about the Disney stuff. And actually, interestingly enough, I knew one of my sisters had a person in her life. I think it was a coworker or something, but that woman did not allow her kids to watch Disney movies. And back then I was like in college and I was like, what are you talking about? Disney movies are great. But now it's like, I know for a fact that Disney, I think the premise is that they were trying to build these wonderful stories, but in the process, they were not highlighting women to the best of women's abilities. And so one of the things that I always say, it's like out with the old Disney language, let's use empower language for our daughters so that they can grow up being empowered. So
But see, that's a perfect example of men not realizing what they're doing. They're perpetuating, the behavioral or the societal expectations, the unconscious behavioral expectations between the genders. And all the fairy tales actually, truthfully, promote behavioral expectations for both a male and female.
Yes.
Okay, so if you look at Snow White or you look at any of the the men have to be the rescuers.
Yeah,
that's a big burden for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
they have to be the problem solvers. They have to release you. They have to save you. I will tell you honestly, this is another thing I talk about. I have a red lizard on my shoulder that's trash talking. But the main thing that this little red lizard does all the time is say, okay, who's going to rescue you? How are you going to get out of this one? Who's going to get you out of this one? And it's like, I just kind of have to say, would you just shut up?
Yeah.
It's like, go away, go away. As old as I am, and as experienced as I am, I still deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also part of for women to really know know your stories.
Mm-hmm.
And those stories come from fairy tales, come from your family. My story of not being able to, getting frustrated because I don't have a voice. The stories of your community.
Absolutely.
So many sources of the stories that we hold inside of us that limit us. So we have to be willing to look at those stories and then to say, how are those stories getting in the way? Now, some of the stories are fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything about it. But those stories that you deem as being limiting are the opportunities to grow and are the opportunities to manage. But it's a long process.
Yes. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, we learned so much today about Disney specifically, but I like the fact that this conversation has been so good for women in corporate because it uncovered the fact that we have to now we're aware that we have to be change agents, whether it's at home or at work. But and that's the whole purpose of me starting this podcast and promoting the fact that women need to know that they're self-sufficient. And I talk a lot about, again, girls in confidence. Actually, I read a statistic. I was horrified that girls' confidence peaks at age 9. A clinical psychologist did a study on that, and that's absolutely horrifying for girls' confidence to peak at age 9. And then one of my other guests, she's a therapist. She says, it's interesting because so confidence peaks at age 9, but then a lot of times women don't pick up that confidence, that working on confidence until like in their 30s, because now they're trying to get that promotion. They're trying to move up the ladder. So between age 9 and, 30, people or women are just kind of going through the motions, not even realizing what is happening in their life until a light bulb turns on and they're like, oh, I need to become a change agent. How do I do it? I have to start working on my confidence and all that good stuff. So
I actually think that confidence, confidence is an evolutionary process.
yes.
So, in your 30s, in some ways, it's kind of like fake it till you make it. So you're in practice. You're practicing and practicing and practicing. And then when you reach, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but when you reach a certain age, you actually get to a point of saying, I don't care what people think.
Absolutely.
This is who I am. I'm constantly learning about myself and the impact that I have on the world. But fundamentally, I don't care.
Good for you, Julia. I love it.
But that's, it's like that's why I say it's evolutionary.
Yes.
Because it will increase with age, because the stakes are higher but lower.
Mm-hmm. I get that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay, well, Julia, this has been a fantastic conversation. So I would like to ask you if you have 2 tips that you can provide women in corporate to continue to think about advancing in their careers.
I'm going to give you 3 because I'm generous. Okay. Great. One is to acknowledge and own your accomplishments and to be able to articulate it in business terminology.
Okay.
The other is know your barriers and to be able to manage it. Okay. And the third is ask for what you want.
Okay.
But read the terrain and ask for what you want in a way that people understand. So going back to the example of being in a meeting and somebody takes your idea, you're telling people, I want to work with you. That's my idea. I want to own it. So that's another way of asking for what you want.
That's fantastic. And I actually love the fact that you said, hey, Mike, thank you for liking my idea. Do you want to work together?
I wouldn't say, fabulous. Do you want? I would not say, do you want? I would say, let's work together.
Oh,
okay. Because if you say, do you want? That opens the possibility of saying no.
Oh, that's perfect wordplay right there. So I totally agree with that. That's fantastic. Okay, Julia. Well, thank you again for being here. Any final words that you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest thing that women need to know is they are powerful and they have to own it. Until you own your power, you're going to run into problems. You're going to run into challenges. So just know that you're powerful. And I know that's easier said than done, but you will get there if you commit to getting there.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks again for being here, Julia. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks, Rosie. I appreciate it too.
Okay. What an interesting conversation with Julia Geisman. We talked about corporate culture. We talked about cognitive dissonance. We talked about how companies say one thing but do another one. But more importantly, we talked about why women need to become change agents that benefits themselves and those people around us. I think the one kind of weirdly interesting and horrific thing that we talked about was Snow White and how horribly women are portrayed in that particular movie. I'm so glad that we have evolved from those times. As always, you will hear 3 tips that Julia provides us. And those tips are tip number 1, to acknowledge and own your accomplishments and be able to articulate them in business terminology. Tip number 2 is know your barriers. And tip number 3 is ask for what you want in the way that people can understand. I think those are 3 great tips. All of Julia's contact information will be on the episode website. The website is nowomanleftbehind.com, and that's WOMAN, woman. And there is a podcast page right on my website. So again, all of Julia's contact information is going to be right there. If in the future you want me to discuss a particular topic, by all means, please send me an email at rosie@nowomanleftbehind.com. I will certainly answer your email as soon as possible. And also on my website, you're going to find some free resources. The first one is a quiz that will tell you where you are in your career. The second item is a course. It's called the Corporate Kickstart course. And it's about an hour's worth of things that you need to start working on in order to kickstart your career. And then the third thing is a corporate kickstart consultation. If you fill out the contact form on my website, I will be able to get to you and I will send you my calendar so that we can schedule a 30-minute consultation and I will help you uncover some of your blind spot. With that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.